Hello, welcome to European Open Briefing for Wednesday, August 8th. I'm Rafi Barajan, currency analyst at xm.com, and we're going to be having a look at what's happening in the currency markets this morning. The dollar is retreating this morning. We do have rather mixed sentiment. We saw some positive trade numbers out of China, though we do have those ongoing trade tensions which are weighing on market sentiment. We can see in Asia, equities were mixed. They gave up earlier gains. We can see Chinese indices ended the day lower, though some markets did close higher. And in Europe, we also have a mixed start. Overall, though, we do have support for equities from very strong corporate earnings results out of the US. We saw US indices moving closer to their record highs set earlier in the year. If you look at currency markets, most pairs are moving within recent ranges. The dollar index, though, has retreated substantially from near one-year highs above 95.50 to around 95 level today. The dollar yen is also weaker. The euro isn't doing too badly, though. It's back above the 1.16 level. The British pound is struggling, though, still. If you look at the Aussie and the Kiwi, the Aussie is marginally higher. We did see some disappointing data out of Australia earlier today, and we also heard from the RBA Governor Philip Lowe saying that we shouldn't expect a rate hike in the near future, though there is some support from those Chinese trade numbers. The Kiwi, though, is one of the better performers. It jumped higher on data showing that inflation expectations in New Zealand moved slightly higher for the third quarter. And if you look at commodities, gold is benefiting from the weaker dollar. It's up by 0.3%, while WTI is marginally higher. There is support for oil prices from those Iranian sanctions which came into effect yesterday, though as far as oil exports are concerned, buyers still have until November to phase out their Iranian purchases. But we did see a drop in US crude oil inventories. But there was also a report from the EIA showing that they lowered their demand for global demand for the next couple of years. If you look at the main performers, we can see gold is up there at the top of the table, followed by Kiwi dollar, whereas dollar yen and euro yen are the weakest performers. So we do have broad support from the yen this morning. So one of the reasons for that is those ongoing trade tensions and the fact that Chinese markets weren't able to sustain their strong gains yesterday, and they reversed lower today. So that paints a somewhat gloomy picture for emerging markets. So that's giving broad support for the yen. We also have a continued speculation about a Bank of Japan monetary policy. Yesterday there were reports that the Bank of Japan twice considered raising interest rates this year, and even though this wasn't actually mentioned in their meeting minutes, we also had a summary of opinions published earlier today for their July meeting, showing the signs of a growing split within the Bank of Japan policy board, as some members were against the more flexible approach to the yield curve target, whereas others wanted an even looser range for the yield curve, for the yield to fluctuate within. And we also have an announcement that the not related to Bank of Japan, but going back to the US announced that it will proceed with the remaining 16 billion of the 50 billion of tariffs. We had seen the initial 34 billion coming into effect. The remaining 16 billion of that 50 billion will come into effect on August the 23rd, and China will likely retaliate with similar tariffs. So despite those headlines, trade tensions aren't quite at the forefront of market attention this morning. As there's some comfort for investors from recent measures announced by Chinese authorities to ease both fiscal and monetary policy in China to cushion China's economy from those trade tariffs. But if you look at dollar yen, we can see that the pair has been on the retreat since late July and is once again struggling below the 111 level. Let's now turn to euro pound, because euro pound hit a 9-month high of 0.8984 earlier today. The euro is also recovering against the dollar, though only modestly. It's back above the 1.16 level to near a 1-week high. There is concerns though still about the strength of the Eurozone economy. Recent data this week out of Germany indicates that German growth continues to be on the soft side. We had disappointing industrial output and industrial orders data coming out of Germany, and of course some renewed worries about Italy. The new Italian government is in talks. They're preparing their new budget, and it's quite possible that the budget will breach Eurozone fiscal rules, so that is something to watch out for. On the other hand, sterling is struggling even more. We've got heightened concerns that the UK will crash out of the EU, given that there's still no sign of progress in the Brexit negotiations. So sterling weakness is helping euro pound move higher, while the dollar's retreat is helping euro dollar at the moment. And finally, let's take a quick look at the Kiwi dollar pair, because we do have the Reserve Bank of New Zealand policy decision due at 21 hours GMT later today. It will be local time on Thursday. The Kiwi did bounce higher today to near 1-week high on data showing inflation expectations in the country rose slightly for the third quarter, and this indicator is watched very closely by the Reserve Bank on New Zealand. And given that recent data out of New Zealand has been on the weak side, this was perhaps one of the more positive ones. So that's why we saw rather a decent reaction to the data, even though the increases in the inflation expectations were very marginal. The Kiwi is also being boosted by Chinese trade numbers. We saw exports out of China rising by a bigger than expected 12.2% in July, though imports did rise faster. So that indicates strong domestic demand, as well as a little impact for the time being on Chinese exports by those US tariffs. So that is somewhat supporting both the Aussie and the Kiwi this morning. Looking at the rest of the day, we do have that New Zealand policy decision later on coming up. It's going to be fairly quiet in the North American session later on, but we do have a Fed speaker coming up as well. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.